It started with a tightening deep in my lower back, sharp, coiling, and relentless. At first, I told myself it was just the Braxton Hicks again. False labor. I'd had them before. I could breathe through this. But as I sat in the passenger seat, rain tapping against the windshield like ticking clocks, I knew this wasn't practice. This was the real thing. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 8:23 p.m. He said he'd just run inside the airport to grab something from his friend. 10 minutes tops, he'd said. That was over an hour ago. My phone buzzed on the center console, vibrating against the leather like a warning. I grabbed it with shaking fingers, praying it was him. But it wasn't a call. It was a notification. A photo. A stupid, filtered photo. There he was, shirtless, tanned, drink in hand, standing poolside at a luxury resort. His best friend Alex threw up peace signs behind him, and someone else held a cigar between their teeth. The caption read, "Finally, peace and freedom with the boys." My mouth went dry. I stared at the screen, my vision pulsing. A contraction ripped through me, hot, searing. I let out a grunt, doubling over. I tried calling. Once, twice. Straight to voicemail. I reached for the door handle on my side, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Of course. He'd taken the keys. The windows were fogging up, the air thick and stale, with heat and panic. The pressure in my belly was growing unbearable. I shifted in my seat, sweat beating down my neck, hands trembling. My fingers found the horn and I slammed it, once, twice, holding it down like a cry for help. No one came. I thought about screaming. I thought about breaking the window. Then, I remembered the glove compartment. Fumbling, I popped it open. A few crumpled fast food napkins, some receipts, and something else. A folded piece of paper. It was an itinerary. 4-day all-inclusive resort stay. Checked in yesterday. Spa appointments. Poolside cabana. Whiskey tasting. And suddenly, it hit me like ice water. He never planned to be there. Not for the birth. Not for me. A pounding knock on the glass made me jump. A uniformed security guard, soaked from the rain, peered in. I don't remember what I said. Something between a scream and a sob. But soon he was opening the door, calling for help on his radio. By the time the wheelchair arrived, I could barely see. My vision blurred with rain and tears and contractions that rolled through me like tidal waves. They wheeled me through the sliding ER doors, fluorescent lights buzzing above. I clutched his jacket to my chest, the one he left behind on the seat. I don't know why. It smelled like him, like pine deodorant and entitlement. But it was the only thing I had. That, and a baby about to arrive without a father. They say you remember the moment your life changes, that it comes with a jolt, a thunderclap, some dramatic cinematic pull. But for me, it was quieter than that. He was standing under fairy lights at a mutual friend's wedding, laughing too loud and swirling, a drink that caught the light like amber glass. I had just gotten promoted, still high on the smell of fresh ink on my business cards and the hum of validation. I wasn't looking for love. Not that night. But when he looked at me, really looked, it was like I'd been chosen. And I mistook that for something sacred. He said I had eyes like dark velvet, that my laugh was addictive. I didn't realize then how often he'd mirror me, my stories, my dreams, like he was studying me just enough to reflect it all back. The illusion of understanding. The perfect echo. We moved fast. Too fast. Within months, I'd packed up my apartment, all my half-finished canvases, my clawfoot easel, the paints I used to collect like relics. I turned down a job in Chicago to move closer to him. We'll build something better together, he promised. It sounded romantic, sacrificial, noble. But somewhere along the way, his dreams became mine by default, and mine disappeared. Remember standing in the bedroom one morning, towel around my waist, and hearing him say I looked better with straight hair. I didn't think much of it then. But slowly, my curls vanished from our bathroom sink. I started wearing neutral colors because he said bright tones were too much. I stopped posting my art online because he joked that everyone was a fake artist these days. He didn't come to my mother's funeral, said he couldn't get out of a work trip, said my grief was too heavy. I carried that weight alone, folded her scarf into a drawer, held her favorite perfume bottle like a talisman. There were days I didn't recognize the woman in our mirror, but I told myself this was love, that I was lucky, that all real marriages required compromise. The baby wasn't planned, not exactly. He had always danced around the topic, first saying he didn't want kids, then claiming he might someday, then shutting down the conversation completely. So when the 2 pink lines appeared, I felt panic and awe all at once. I was sure he'd be angry. But strangely, he wasn't. He kissed my forehead and said, "Guess life decided for us." He even rubbed my belly, told me I'd be a beautiful mom. For one fleeting moment, I thought this baby would save us. Or maybe just me. But as my body changed, he grew distant. When I complained of back pain, he told me I was being dramatic. When I cried over stretch marks, he suggested I invest in better lotions. When I asked him to attend a prenatal class, he said, "I'll wing it. How hard can it be?" I remember the day I packed away my paints for good. I was 6 months pregnant, exhausted, my fingers swollen. I sat on the floor of what should have been the nursery, looking at my old sketchbook, the one with cityscapes and faceless women in gowns. I flipped through the pages and realized I hadn't drawn in months. The woman holding the pencil felt like a ghost. He came in, glanced at the book, and said, "You'll have time for hobbies again later. Right now, just focus on the baby." As if art was a luxury. As if it wasn't the one thing keeping me tethered to myself. 8 months in, I stood in the mirror, hands cradling the swell of my belly, and for the first time in years, I whispered the truth. I don't know who I am anymore. My hair was flat-ironed, my nails nude and short, my skin pale from staying indoors. My perfume, the one my mother left me, sat unused on the dresser. He said he didn't like the scent. That night, I sprayed it anyway. Just once. Just enough to remember her. To remember me. The first few weeks after the birth blurred together like smeared paint on an overused canvas. The baby barely slept. Neither did I. My body felt foreign, stitched, stretched, unrecognizable. Every time I moved, it hurt. Every time I bled, I remembered just how alone I had been when he entered the world, but I still waited, hoped. He came back on a Sunday, no warning, no apology. Just the sound of his key in the door and the creak of his suitcase wheels across the hardwood. I held our son in my arms when he walked in. Sunburned, wearing sunglasses indoors, smelling faintly of whiskey and pool chlorine. He looked at us, like we were strangers. Then he smiled, small, lazy. "Hey," he said, "you look tired." Tired. That word settled into my bones like a verdict. He wrapped his arms around me loosely, like someone hugging a coworker in a parking lot. "It was good for me," he said. I needed space. My head was all over the place. You know how intense pregnancy can get for both of us. I nodded, because I didn't have the energy to scream. I told myself, maybe he came back changed. Maybe we could still fix this. It was 2 weeks later, a Tuesday night. The baby had finally fallen asleep on my chest after hours of crying. I was curled up on the couch, a bowl of soggy cereal beside me, the TV playing a muted rerun of something I couldn't name. I remembered we were out of diapers. He was supposed to order them. His laptop was open on the kitchen counter. I tapped, it awake. The screen lit up, and with it, a notification I'll never forget. A group chat, titled Resort Kings. My finger hovered. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But my hand moved before my conscience could stop me. The window expanded. A string of messages from the weekend I was in labor. Photos of sunlit cocktails, pool games, drunken dances. A video clip of him doing cannonballs into a turquoise pool, while someone off camera shouted, "You're a free man now!" Then the voice notes. Laughter. Jokes about how he escaped the baby trap. A message from one of them. "Dude, you sure it's even yours?" And then, his reply. "Who knows? Doesn't matter now." Something in me shattered. Not like glass. No, that would have been too clean. It was more like tearing seams in fabric, slow, grinding. A rip that started in my chest and spread outward. My baby stirred on my chest. I instinctively tightened my arms around him. I didn't cry, not at first. I just stared at the screen. My vision tunneled, ears buzzing. I read everything, from beginning to end. The part where he called my texts unhinged. The part where he joked about blocking me while I was in labor. The part where they rated the resort bartender a solid 9, while I bled alone in a hospital bed. I didn't scream. I didn't wake him up. I walked to the hallway mirror, barefoot, the baby still tucked against my shoulder. I stared into my own eyes, the same mirror where I once whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." This time, I said nothing. But I saw her. Not the woman he bent. Not the version he liked best. Not the ghost, with the straightened hair and the pale clothes. Me. I went back to the laptop. I didn't delete anything. I didn't confront him. I downloaded it all. Every screenshot. Every audio clip. I organized it into folders, labeled by date. I backed them up on a drive. Then I opened a blank note and wrote one sentence. He left us once. He'll do it again. But next time I'll be ready. I left on a Wednesday. Not with a suitcase, not with a dramatic goodbye. Just a diaper bag, a duffel with our essentials, and the baby sleeping against my chest in the carrier. He was in the shower when I walked out the front door. I remember the water running, the low hum of a podcast playing from his phone. He never heard the door click behind me. I had already booked the Airbnb the night before, a little studio apartment 30 minutes away from town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A soft place to land. The photos showed pale yellow walls and orange curtains that glowed like autumn leaves when sunlight poured through them. When I arrived, I stood by the window for almost 10 minutes. Just breathing. The curtains fluttered slightly from the ceiling fan, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, not like our house, which always reeked of his cologne and whatever. Bland candle scent he insisted on. Clean linen, eucalyptus, something neutral. This was warm. This was real. The days blurred at first. Diapers, feedings, soft cries in the night. But with every sunrise that came and went without him, I felt a little less hollow. There were no more forced smiles, no pretending I was fine. I cried openly now. Tears that came in silence while washing bottles, or while staring at the ceiling during late-night feeds. But even grief, when faced honestly, felt like healing. I started sketching again. It began with simple lines. My hands were out of practice, shaky. I drew the baby's hands while he napped on my chest. The orange curtains, a lavender sprig in a chipped vase by the sink. One afternoon, I found my old art page still active online. Forgotten, but not deleted. People had commented on my last post from a year ago. Where are you? Hope you're well. Miss, your work. I stared at the screen for a long time before uploading a new piece. Just a pencil drawing of a mother and child, curled together like twin moons. No caption, just a sketch and silence. 3 days later, an old name popped up in my inbox. Ray, my college roommate. We hadn't spoken in years, but she recognized the style immediately. Is this you? Please say yes. I run a women's group now. Art therapy and support circles. You should come. I hesitated. Then I said yes. The group met every Friday, in a converted community center. Folding chairs in a circle, mismatched mugs, warm light. I sat there the first day, clutching my tea like a shield, convinced I didn't belong. But then one woman shared her story. Then another. Betrayals that echoed mine. Different men. Same patterns. We weren't broken. Just bruised in the same places. I started showing up each week, talking, listening, drawing during the sessions, sketching portraits of women reclaiming their voices. It felt like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was in. I picked up a little freelance work, digital illustrations, branding for small businesses. It didn't pay much, but it felt like earning myself back. The stroller I bought was secondhand. Its wheels squeaked, the canopy was faded. But I sanded it, repainted it with soft blues and golds, and added tiny hand-painted constellations along the edges. People stopped me on the street. "That's beautiful," they said. I smiled and told them I made it. They didn't know it was a symbol, not just of survival, but of ownership, of a mother who didn't ask for this journey, but claimed it anyway. There were still hard days, lonely nights, the weight of everything I'd given and lost. But every morning, sunlight streamed through those orange curtains, and every night, I held a boy who smiled with his whole face, who had my eyes, and none of his father's coldness. And every time I reached for my sketchbook or clicked send on a new client email, I reminded myself, this is what freedom feels like. Not loud, not glamorous, just steady. Just mine. By the time spring arrived, I no longer flinched at the sound of his name. The orange curtains were still there, still blooming with light every morning. But now they framed a life that looked entirely different than the one I'd left behind. The baby was crawling, fast and curious. His laugh echoed through the tiny apartment like wind chimes. I'd lost count of how many late nights I spent, sketching while he slept, or rocking him with one hand and finishing client work with the other. I was tired, but not in the same way. Not bone-tired from betrayal. Not spiritually starved. This was the tired that came from creating, from healing. My art had taken on new life. It started with one Etsy listing, a print of a mother and child sleeping beneath a canopy of stars. Then another, and another. Each piece sold faster than the last. Strangers sent messages. This reminds me of my story. I feel seen. Some of them sent photos of their own children. Some sent poetry. There was a quiet sisterhood there, invisible but powerful. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just building a business. I was building a self. The self he'd tried to flatten into silence. I still hadn't heard from him. Not really. There were occasional text messages, emotionless, clinical, spaced out over weeks. Did you get the thing I left in the garage? Can we discuss money soon? He never once asked about our son. Not once. I never replied. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. I kept screenshots. I archived voicemails. I documented everything. The woman who once begged him to come home during contractions was gone. Now, I was patient, focused, sharp. The day the phone call came, I was wearing a paint-stained t-shirt and cutting tiny stars out of cardstock for a nursery mural I'd been commissioned to design. My hands were covered in glue. My hair was up in a messy bun. My son sat in his high chair, smearing mashed banana across his tray like finger paint. My lawyer's voice was calm, but purposeful. "We're ready," she said. "You have everything. You've been more than generous with silence. But it's time to sign." That night, after the baby was asleep, I pulled the folder out of my drawer. Inside, a copy of the chat logs from the Resort Kings group. The medical reports showing my emergency labor. A photo of his social media post from the pool, dated and time-stamped. Financial statements showing the withdrawals, tens of thousands gone from our shared account. Proof of abandonment, and on top, the petition for full custody and asset protection. All it needed was a signature. I held the pen for a long time. Not because I was unsure. I wasn't. Not anymore. But because I wanted to remember how this felt. To choose myself, deliberately. I signed with scarlet red ink, not blue. Not black. Red, the color of fire, of warning. The color of blood and rebirth. 2 days later, Ray texted me a screenshot. It was from someone's public Instagram story, a photo of him, standing beside a shiny white boat. Sunglasses on, holding a bottle of champagne, his arm draped around a woman I didn't recognize. The caption read, "New chapter, new seas, no baggage." And underneath, a comment from one of his friends. "You really dodged that bullet, bro." My stomach didn't turn. My throat didn't tighten. I just closed the phone, opened my banking app, the joint account, frozen. My lawyer had already taken care of it. I smiled. Let him enjoy his illusion of freedom, his boat, his curated lies. Because the truth was, he hadn't dodged anything. I had. Later that evening, I pulled out my old perfume bottle, the one I hadn't touched since the mirror moment. The one that once reminded me of my mother and of the self I used to be. I dabbed a little behind my ears. The scent rose like memory, strong, floral, and unapologetic. I stood in front of the mirror again, the orange light casting warm halos on my shoulders, and whispered, "I'm still here." But this time, I didn't mean survival. I meant arrival. I'd always wondered what it would feel like to see him again. Not in memory, not in photos, but in person. What would I feel? Rage, fear, sadness? But when the courtroom door opened and he walked in, designer suit, too much cologne, a practiced smirk on his lips, I felt nothing. Not hatred, not longing, just stillness, like a lake after a storm, flat, unshakable, quietly dangerous. He didn't look at me at first. He was too busy laughing with his attorney, a woman dressed in sleek black with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon. Then he noticed me. His smirk wavered. I wore an ivory suit, not white, too naive, not black, too bitter. Ivory. The tsai, color of resolve, of rebirth, of quiet, unapologetic strength. My son sat beside me in a small stroller, playing with a teething ring, babbling softly. I placed one hand gently on his chest. He cooed. The judge entered. Everyone stood. My heart didn't race. I had already bled, already burned. What was left now was fire turned to steel. The hearing began. His lawyer opened with polished words, emotionally charged, misunderstandings, poor communication. My client deeply regrets the timing of events but asserts his desire to co-parent. I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. Then it was my turn. I rose. I held nothing back. A thick folder slid across the table, its weight louder than any spoken word, Inside, photos of the hospital parking lot time-stamped against his vacation posts. Screenshots of the group chat. Who knows, doesn't matter now. Medical records, my emergency labor, no next of kin present. Financial statements. Tens of thousands withdrawn for a BOTA letter from my therapist, documenting emotional abandonment and psychological trauma. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I just let the pages speak. Let his smirk fade with every turn. By the end, even his lawyer looked uncomfortable. He kept glancing over at me, but I never met his gaze. The judge asked if I had anything else to say. I stood slowly, smoothed my jacket, and said quietly, I just want my son to grow up knowing that his mother didn't stay silent when silence was easier, that she protected him, even when no one protected her. No dramatics, just truth. The courtroom was silent. The ruling came quickly. Full custody, financial compensation, restricted visitation pending psychological evaluation. His face fell, not with anger, but with disbelief, as if the world he built on lies had just buckled beneath him, because it had. He walked out without looking back, but someone else did. His parents had been sitting quietly in the back the whole time. I hadn't even noticed them until his mother approached me, slowly, as I was gathering the diaper bag. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her mouth trembled. I didn't know, she whispered, voice cracking. I thought he loved you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said gently, I thought so too. She leaned forward hesitantly and hugged me. A soft, broken thing. His father didn't speak. Just nodded once, solemnly before turning away. Outside, the sun was bright, almost theatrical in its timing. I walked to the car slowly, my son reaching for the sky with chubby fingers. I strapped him into the new car seat. Clean, safe, facing forward now. In the front seat, waiting for me, was a red leather journal. I'd bought it the week before. Empty. Unwritten. Its cover glowed faintly in the light, the way scarlet things do when they're alive with purpose. I took a deep breath and turned the first page. Chapter 1. After the fire. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.